Hey everyone, welcome back to another live episode of the Relevant Recruiter Show. I'm super fired up today. I have Elisabeth Hudson joining me today. And Elisabeth actually reached out to me about my podcast when she first joined my network on LinkedIn and shared how useful the podcast was for her as being a new recruiter. Fast forward, she ended up connecting me with some of the partners at her company, and we ended up doing some business together. And I've had the pleasure of getting a front row seat to watch Elisabeth go from a rookie to a rock star now. So Elisabeth is a former accountant actually that turned into a recruiter, and she really leverages her industry knowledge to really help differentiate herself as she's now focused on helping accounting and finance professionals reach their career goals. Now, Elisabeth is part of the Talance Group team. Some of you that watch the podcast, we had Alex on the show a couple months back, and she is one of the managing partners at Talance Group. Now, Ellie's going to share her experience of going from an accountant to being a recruiter, and then she's also going to share her experience working with me in the Relevant Recruiter program and some of the fun things that we did together. So after that long intro, Ellie, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Donnie. I'm really excited to be here. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Now, before we get into the good stuff, can you share a couple personal highlights? What's going on with your life? Where do you live? What's happening?
Yeah, so I'm living in Houston, Texas, actually living very close to the Gulf, down in League City. Biggest thing in my life right now, just bought this house about 3 months ago. So that's had its ups and downs so far. I'm a wife. My husband and I are coming up on 3 years, coming in November. And I have a bonus daughter who's turning 21 in May. So really excited about that. We're going to finally make it out to Vegas. All three of us have never been. So it's been fun watching her grow up. I actually came into her life when she was 15 years old, and just really kind of watching her grow up and now move out into her own apartment with her roommates and kind of go on her own journey there and decide to go back to school. She's actually going to be starting up her own coffee truck someday. So it's really inspiring.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I didn't know you had a bonus kid. I've got 2 bonus sons myself. So you guys are going to Vegas for the first time, each one of you individually, or first time as a group?
As a group, all together. We told her when she turned 21, that would be our trip, and we would wait to go to Vegas for her 21st birthday.
Love it.
Very excited for that.
Cool. Well, let's transition now into your career. So give us a little background. Obviously I introduced and we started in the accounting and finance space, but, tell us a little bit about that journey. How did you get there? And then we'll go from there.
Well, I can say, ever since I was a little girl, I always wanted to be a recruiter. No, I'm just kidding. No, so I, and you might not know this about me, Donnie, I actually started out as a teacher. So I taught for a few years and actually taught math. And I decided that I loved teaching. I would absolutely, do that in some aspect again, but I wanted to make more money because, as you know, I'm a very competitive sailor. It's a very expensive sport. So I knew that I had to be able to support that. So I decided to go back to school. Around then, I was going through my quarter life crisis. So I actually looked at schools overseas. I knew I didn't want to go back for another 4 years to get into accounting. So actually ended up going to Trinity College over in Dublin, Ireland. The unique thing about that was they had a sailing team that I was really excited to join that I didn't get to do my first go around for school. And so it was actually a 4-year degree packed into 2 semesters. So that was really intriguing to me, was to get my accounting, just living overseas in Ireland for 2 semesters. I could have stayed over there and worked my way through Big Four and got certified. However, that would have been a 4-year commitment to staying in Ireland. Family's back home, whole life's back home. So came back to Texas, got on with a accounting job over in Houston, was in accounting for about 4 years. But along the way, I had a recruiter reach out to me and asked me, about different roles that they had available. And she, got to talking with me and loved my energy on the call. And she'd asked me if I'd ever thought about recruiting. And no, I was like, I haven't ever even considered, I had so many questions for her. So This was with another recruiting firm. This was not with Talance Group. And I think this was back in 2019. So got to chatting with her, came into interview and met the team. And they had a contract side, along with their recruiting perm roles that they were filling. And that even really intrigued me, was going into maybe more of a contract side as an accountant, getting to jump into different environments and different challenges and kind of meet a lot of people and network that way. So I was kind of debating at that time going into recruiting or going into contract. And actually this was, February of 2020. So I knew there was something going on, like, there's future doom in the market and this uncertainty in the world, about to shut down because of this whole pandemic. So I actually at that time was lucky enough to be given an offer with one of the accounting companies that I'd worked for previously to come on 100% remote. So it's like, do I make this jump now? Do I jump into recruiting, something that I know I might not be great at right away and might not see that income, or do I stay with my stable salary and with all this, pending on the market? So I jumped into that, and I'm very, very grateful for it. I was 100% remote, I had a stable job all through the pandemic. Fast forward a year later, I actually had Jamie Davenport from Talance Group reach out to me about a role that was really close to me down here in Houston. So I got to chatting with her, and I was really happy with my company. I loved that I was working 100% remote and wasn't looking to necessarily leave, but got to chatting with Jamie, and she said, have you ever thought about recruiting? I was like, well, actually, yes, I have, and kind of told her my backstory there. And she had told me, Talance Group had been wanting for a long time to start hiring on some rookie recruiters, and that they were talking about hiring on a rookie class. But, back, this was March of 21, the market hadn't quite picked up yet. So she said, we're not quite ready yet, but this is what we're envisioning. So and I told her, like I said, I wasn't looking to necessarily leave yet. And so fast forward to June, the summer of last year, I reached back out and I said, hey, I'm still really interested in this and the prospect of joining Talance Group. She told me all about the culture and all the people and the tenure over there. So I connected with Vic Nath over there at Talance Group, and Doug Hubbard, who himself was a former accountant. Had a CPA, and I was really picking their brains, like, what did that transition look like for y'all? And, how do you enjoy the recruiting side versus accounting? And so long story short, I actually hired in a year ago this month to Talance Group. And I hired in outside of this little rookie class that they did. It was about 3 rookies that started in the summer. And so I was kind of a one-off, and we joke all the time that I got like the butt end of the stick because I joined by myself, but it was, great. I very much so appreciate being given that opportunity and being able to jump on a Talance Group. And it's been amazing.
Yeah. Well, working with a team, you guys have such a cool, fun culture, and, great set of people to work for. You're blessed to be able to start with such a kick-ass company, right out of the gate. Was there one thing specifically that made you go like, yeah, I want to do recruiting now instead of accounting, finance? That's obviously almost an apple and an orange, like, what was it that you're like, yeah, I think I'm ready for this now?
Absolutely. So I, really talking with Doug about, kind of how that looked for him. It was, for me as an accountant, you're meeting deadlines and you're putting in all these extra hours and all this extra work, and, you're still kind of making the same pay. And it's like, yes, you can, climb up and get promotions and increase there. But, I am very money motivated, back to why I switched in the first place to accounting. And, I do like a challenge. So just knowing that all the extra time that I'm going to put in to it and all the extra hours that I'm going to be able to see the reward and kind of make my pace there. So that was definitely a driving factor for me.
Right. So the more financial upside and kind of creating your own ways. Yeah. Can definitely see that. So, what were kind of the differences of your day though, as you started going from, I don't know, crunching numbers to reaching out and calling people? How did your days kind of start to shift right when you went from one career to the next?
Yeah. Accounting can be, exciting at times, but for the most part, I felt like a glorified bookkeeper. So it was very much so doing the same thing, very repetitive, month in and month out, month in and month out. And for me, the first thing I noticed jumping into recruiting is just something different every day, every hour almost, being able to switch gears. And I feel like I have very much that mindset that I'm able to jump all over the place. So I liked that this kind of allowed for that. And being able to talk to people all day and not just be sitting there staring at a spreadsheet full of numbers. And back to the kind of the teaching thing, I love helping people and just being able to, make an impact in people and help them find a good job.
Right. Well, I was going to ask you actually about the teaching thing is like, what of that? Because I think teaching is so unique. I mean, are there certain things that you're bringing from the teaching world that you're applying, to recruiting?
Absolutely. I think, I always feel like I'm not a creative person, but there was an aspect that I had to be creative, right, when coming up with lesson plans and keeping my kids engaged. And, I very much use that creative side now here in recruiting and just being able to talk to people and kind of, help guide them along the way, whether it's interview prep or guidance, and also having tough conversations. I had to have a lot of tough conversations with parents, just kind of comes with the teaching. So definitely feel like that helped.
Yeah. What was maybe what was the biggest surprise maybe for you as you kind of jumped into the industry? I'm sure you had like a vision of what it would look like, and then you get in, you're actually doing the job and you're like, oh, I didn't think this was going to happen. Is there anything that kind of showed up for you there?
I thought all the candidates were definitely going to want to talk to me every day. I thought, anytime I jumped on the phone and called somebody, whether it was a warm call or a cold call, that they would just be, happy to chat. And it's not that. There's a lot of times where you make a call, whether it's a warm call or a cold call, and it, could go straight to voicemail, right? Because a lot of times, me in particular, I would have random phone numbers, right? They would go straight to voicemail. And so when someone's looking at a voicemail nowadays, it's a text. They might not even be listening to it. And, the voicemail might be starting off, hey, it's Elisabeth Hudson, recruiter with Talance Group, former accountant, And, I'm assuming they're just hitting delete. I have no idea, if they're actually listening or, if I'm even making it to that point to where I'm reaching these candidates. So that was hard. I think first going in, it's like I'm doing all these calls and sending all these emails, but it's like, are they even listening?
Right. Yeah, I can imagine that was it's definitely a challenge in the industry, right? And it's funny just kind of hearing that. That's a funny perspective of like you come in, you think, well, hey, I'm recruiting, I'm here to offer you a job. Everybody should be picking up the phone. And then you realize that it takes a little bit more to get creative. And yeah, you're very creative, by the way. You need to give yourself some credit there. I really enjoy watching the content that you've been creating.
Thank you.
Yeah. What I have an idea of the success that you've had and how you've kind of really been able to kind of hit the ground running and thrive, as being a rookie recruiter. What are some of the things that you would tie back to some of that success?
I have a long commute into work every day, and I was coming into the office every day. So I'm down like south of Houston, and our office now, we have a house in the Heights. So it's about an hour twice a day. So what I would do on that drive in, because I get most of my energy in the morning, would be to listen to podcasts on my way in. It's like I'm brand new to recruiting. I want to soak it all in and learn as much as I can. And started listening to a couple podcasts, and of course, Relevant Recruiter popped up, and I started listening to your podcasts, and I'm like, wow, this is really inspiring because of all the recruiters that you've had on talking about what's been successful for them, what's working for them, and kept hearing over and over and over again, like, you got to put yourself out there. You got to create content and add value to your market. And like, there's got to be something to this. So I'm like constantly listening to that on my way in. And I'm sure my coworkers are like rolling their eyes every time. I'm like, oh my gosh, I heard this on the podcast this morning. And, have y'all tried this? And, one of those was actually your Loom videos that you were kind of talking about doing. And that one really was intriguing me. I was like, what? He's sending these videos to people's individual like messengers on LinkedIn and connecting with them first. So I, of course, looked into it and got a Loom account and started doing that. And it kind of going back to the cold calls and the warm calls, like not knowing if they're actually, reaching people, instantly if somebody's actually viewed your video, if they viewed the whole video, you get a notification. And the feedback that I was getting from candidates was amazing. Like, hey, this is so unique. Nobody's doing this. I really appreciate it. And just, they love to hear, and be complimented, on their background and their experience. And so that to me was really rewarding. I was kind of feeling a little deflated, not hearing back from candidates. So that was a big thing for me, was having that. And Talance Group. I mean, Doug Hubbard and Stefan and my whole perm team, really took me under their wing. And trained me, and I jumped in right away. They had me making calls day 2, which I actually called. I think it was like the second person that answered the phone. I was like, "Oh, I see you work for Slumberger," and it's Slumberger, so I know that now. But this guy was like super sweet and didn't even correct me. So just having like, for them, I'm very hands-on learner. So for them to just have me jump in and start just cranking it out and, going and learning as I go through the different process. And Talance Group actually has like this whole training manual. It's like, I call it the Talance Group Bible, but it's just all the value that we add for candidates and clients, like here in a book that I can refer back to all the time. I carry it with me everywhere, but you don't get that a lot with joining different companies. Hey, here's our manual. This is how we do things. And here are some of the tough conversations you're going to have and how to answer it. So I would say, first and foremost, the mentorship and training that I had with Talance Group helped me, take off running. And then, just listening to the podcast and absorbing as much as I can with all that time that's not wasted anymore, right? As I'm driving into work. So.
Yeah. So you just basically became a student of the game, essentially. And I think the thing, with my opportunity to work with you is not only are you a student of the game, but you actually have got out of the bleachers and onto the playing field, right? And you play the game, willing to test. What were some of the things that, like, as you were being taught by Talance, like or just anything else, like what were some of the things you're like, okay, like that sounds cool, but I got a little resistance about doing something like that?
Oh, probably cold calls for sure. I do know there's value in that, and there should absolutely be a mixture of, how you reach out to candidates. It can't just be one way. But just, for me, I don't like when people call me and just immediately try to sell me. So I think, there's certainly value in a warm call, like after reaching out to somebody on LinkedIn and kind of getting the feedback there. But I would say out of everything, that would be, to answer your question, the only thing that I was a little hung up on.
Great. Now, what about as you've, now you're a year, what are you seeing in your market specifically? Because, I just, with my point of view, working with so many different companies, is like, there's so many different opinions about where things are at. Some people are just hiring full steam ahead, can't even keep up. And, there's other people that have slowed down drastically. I mean, what are you guys seeing in your Houston market right now?
We haven't seen a slowdown on our side. We've got on our perm side over 100 jobs that we're still working on for finance and accounting roles, and still making a ton of placements there. I know in some areas like tech, they're seeing jobs that were open that they're just closing them internally, or they're making cuts. But being that we're in Houston, oil and gas is still doing really well. So a lot of our clients are oil and gas and energy. So we haven't seen any kind of pains there so far.
Got it. So kind of just transitioning to some of the work that we did together. You mentioned that you're actually following my podcast. You're actually already implementing some things, before we even started, which is inspiring. Again, I think that's really cool that you're not just a student of the game, but you're a player of the game and really executing. What kind of surprised you about, joining the program and working with me?
I wouldn't say anything necessarily surprised me, right? Because going in, I didn't know what to expect, right? I've never done, any kind of recruiter training programs before. But what was refreshing was, for you being a coach through that process was how committed you were to, pushing us to actually implement, right? And holding us accountable. Um, I think that was a huge piece for me. And then I was, really curious. Like I'd always heard bits and pieces from your podcast. I'm like, what is this training going to be about? I was really excited to kind of, hear the bits and pieces behind, how all this works and, putting in that extra work and making the content and really figuring out what our target market was and kind of diving
Right.
into that.
Awesome. Now, one of the things you've kind of already brought it up about the mixture of like having to do some cold calling, having some other things. In the best way you can describe him, how would you say, what is the difference between that cold call versus like somebody wanting to be on there, like that warm call? What is the difference of that conversation? How does that flow for you?
Well, it's an amazing feeling. I mean, after putting in all that work, there was Loom videos that I had sent back in January of this year, and I had people reaching out in May and June, that I'd already established a relationship with. Some of them I jumped on a call with them back earlier in the year, and some of them I didn't. And they're like, "Hey, I remember you. You
Right.
sent me this video," and they were very willing to connect with me and talk because of the time that I had put in through that. Um, that's been very successful, going through your program. For me, starting out, I had only been recruiting for a couple months before you, came on and started coaching Talance Group. And
Mm-hmm.
I can attribute, out of my 13 placements that I've made so far, 7 of them directly to you. 4 of them were through Loom videos and 3 of them were through, our automation that we're using through LinkedIn. So it's definitely been a huge part of my success so far.
Oh, it's so awesome to hear. I knew there was some success early on, but that's a great update.
Yeah.
Great update.
And not only that, when I joined Talance Group, I think I had like 300 connects on LinkedIn and maybe 500 by the time you started working with us. And now I'm at like 3,800 connects on
Right.
LinkedIn and over 4,000 followers. So it's been great. I've even got people reaching out to me. Hey, I've seen your posts. I've had a lot of that. And they're good candidates. It's not
Right.
just, random people reaching out. So that's been awesome to hear because all that time that, you put in creating the content and
Yep.
hoping that something like that would come back to you, they're recognizing it.
Yeah. This is just from where my perspective, and it's probably something maybe you have given a lot of thought to, maybe you haven't, but most people that go through my program are usually the founder, the owner, the CEO of a company. And I know for a lot of people, once they're putting out content, there's a lot of internal stuff going on, a lot of mindset work going on. And I think one of the things, and again, you may not recognize it, but I think it's really inspiring to me and others, is you were willing to put yourself out there in an industry where you're not even, don't even know the whole industry yet. You're still learning, but while you're learning, you're building some brand recognition for yourself. What was kind of your experience with creating content? Like, what were some of the things that maybe overwhelmed you, or what are some of the things that inspired you?
That's a really good question. I think you kind of touched on it there. I was really nervous at first. It's like, you can look on my LinkedIn. It's no secret how long I've been recruiting and what my past looks like. But, you and Talance Group were like, hey, you are relevant because you were an accountant, you worked in corporate, you can relate to these candidates. So I had that going for me to help kind of ease some of that fear of, putting content out there. But, again, like what I learned from Talance Group and all the things that you can add value for your candidates, whether it's interview prep or even for them putting in their resignation and what that conversation is going to look like and making that, as painless as possible for them. And, the resume advice that we give and just all those things were already out there. So it's really just
Right.
me kind of taking that and making my own and reposting it. So I was very grateful for that because I feel like I would have been like creating my own wheel if it wasn't for that.
Right.
And so a lot of my content has come directly from this little manual over here from Talance Group. And yeah, I've had a lot of really good feedback from people, just even, appreciating just like the little bit of advice I'm putting out there.
Right. Right. I love that. And I love how you're already getting those, inbound conversations as a result of putting yourself out there. And I think, again, that's why, I think it's so inspiring. It's so many people that have, been in the industry for 10 years are hesitant about putting themselves out there because of being an imposter or whatever. And you're a couple months in, you're going full throttle, you're seeing results from it. And I just want to share that because to help other people kind of push through their own limiting beliefs around that, because it's a lot to go on that journey of being a content creator. And like I said, you've been ultra creative. I've seen you kind of leading the charge over there. It's really fun to watch. And I think you bring up another really good point, which is, a lot of times we can just take information and put it into our own words and tailor it to our specific audience. And it's going to, connect with them. We don't always need to be reinventing the wheel. And when people are doing marketing content, really you should be kind of saying the same things over and over again, but just in different ways, right? That's how your market gets to know truly what you are about. So it's really cool to hear your story, around that and how the content strategy has already impacted your business. Tell me a little bit about the automation, because people usually have a little bit of fear about any type of automation. Like, what was your thinking about automation going in, and what is your thinking about automation now?
Yeah, for automation, I was concerned that it would, my message essentially would be screaming, this is an automated message. Right. So, but, you gave us ways to make it more conversational, when you're reaching out and more, doing a little research. Like, for example, I think one of my automated messages, like there was a company here in Houston. I knew they were moving their offices, 30 minutes down the road, which in Houston, that can impact somebody like be an hour plus commute. Right. So just, hey, I heard your office was moving, how does that impact you? And it was a really good response because, to them, it was just more genuine. And I think it's just all about the message that you put out there and making sure that you're really fine tuning who you're sending that message to. But yeah, there's always going to be hiccups along the way, but it's like few and far between as far as somebody Right. being offended, or maybe you accidentally reached out to somebody that your teammate just reached out to. And it's like, my bad, you're in good hands. And I think that's only happened a few times. And I know that was a concern initially. So Right. It's been working out.
That's awesome. And I love how you kind of describe, because I think people have this thing of, probably because of the way people are, a lot of people grab thousands of emails and then just drip people through automated email campaigns. And it's all this mass approach. And I think you really brought up something that's really important for people that are listening to understand about automation, that a lot of times is I can automate to 10 people and I'm still leveraging my time and leveraging myself. And the more specific that list is, the more chance of response. And I love your example there of going out, doing some a little bit of research, finding a company that's moving, and then starting a relevant conversation. Right. And I think that's the other thing, is people think that they have to sell all the time with their messaging. And when we come out, we just start dialogue, that opens a lot more doors. So I think you bring up a really good point with that.
Yeah.
What would you say to a new recruiter, that would be considering joining my program?
To a new recruiter, like a rookie recruiter?
Yep.
Well, listen to the podcast. I definitely think that adds a ton of value. It was interesting, some of your podcasts, some of the people that you've had on there, like the $1 Million Recruiter, I had already been looking at her YouTube videos. So I was like, oh, I didn't realize that y'all did a podcast together. So, there's a lot of people that you've had on your show that, there's a lot of good pieces of information to really get a good idea of, what recruiting is going to look like and what's worked for people, what hasn't worked for people, and just hearing their stories and how they got in, because nobody grows up and says they want to be a recruiter. So yeah, I would say that. And just, I would encourage them, if they are listening to your podcast or they do come across your content, to talk about you to their company. And I know that's really how we've kind of made a connection with Talance Group. I was over here fangirling it. I reached out to Donnie on LinkedIn. I was like, hey, I listen to your podcast every morning on my way to work. You're really inspiring. I'm learning a lot. And, then Jennifer Silvera on our team really got that ball rolling and helped make that introduction to our team. So I would say, just it's worth a shot for sure just like using a trainer to help, hold you accountable for pushing yourself to the next level. When you're working out, it's like same thing in recruiting. It's like you can't just keep using the same thing year in and year out because it worked forever.
Right.
The world is changing. You can't keep going at it the same way you went at it. I mean, you got to kind of look around and adapt to that. So, and I'm a huge fan of work smarter, not harder. So I think that a lot of what you do is, working smarter, not harder, but also, being able to do both at the same time. So.
Awesome. Well, enjoyed my time, working with your entire team and working with. Remember the message that you sent to me when we connected right away. I always enjoy those. Very humbling to receive those. So it's awesome. Sometimes I always wonder, like, well, who's listening to the podcast? Who's finding value out of it? And it's always, every time I'm like, do I really like this? And then people are like, oh, dude, that thing's so. I love hearing that feedback and how it actually truly impacted your journey in recruiting. It's like I said, humbling to me that this show has made that impact. And it was important to me to get you on the show 1 year later, and I think that's what's inspiring about it is like you basically started from scratch. And 1 year later, here we are interviewing you about your success in this industry. I mean, you should give yourself a huge pat on the back there for all the great work that you've put in. And just kind of in general, been in the industry for a year now, already having some success. I mean, what are you most fired up and excited about now?
I'm most fired up about all these people that I've reached out to, coming back to me. Like I said, it took a long time, but I've sent them videos individually, and hopefully they're seeing me pop up over and over again on their LinkedIn. So I'm excited for all that coming back around, and eventually down the line, those candidates that I placed coming to me, looking to basically fill roles on their team and build out their team.
Love it. Truly building the desk and build the business. Thank you, Ellie, for everything. Where can our connect with you?
I would say LinkedIn. I am primarily on LinkedIn. I haven't quite made it over to Facebook yet. So
perfect. So check out Elisabeth Hudson on LinkedIn. Last thing, you get to be the expert here, Elisabeth. I'm going to put you right to the fire here. There's a lot of recruiters. You've dropped a lot of knowledge here, but if we were going to kind of sum it up to one kind of piece of advice, like what's one piece of advice you'd give to a rookie recruiter?
Never stop learning. Definitely continue to, go through professional development, look out there and see, what kind of podcasts are out there, or, different materials where you can kind of just try new things and not just stick with, hey, this works, I'm never going to change it. So just never stop learning.
Love it. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Elisabeth Hudson, excuse me. And that will wrap up this episode of the Relevant Recruiter Show. We will be back here next week. I think next week it's going to be just me doing a solo show. But the week after that, we have a roundtable coming to join us. We'll have a couple of big hitters in the industry, and I'll be picking their brains. So stay tuned for that one. Ellie, again, thank you so much for being here with me today. To the rest of you guys, have a great rest of your week. We'll see you all soon.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.